Okay, Audi S3, here we go. And a story called... So this one time,
At band camp?
I was driving this yellow Lamborghini Huracan up to the coast and it was lashing it down with rain. And I don't know if you've ever driven a Lamborghini before. I've driven a Lamborghini before, like. But they get loads of attention. People with their phones out and that. Normally it's good. You know, acknowledge them, give them a wave, pretend it's your car. But some people like do inexplicable things when you're in a car like that. Like they have to prove that you are not better than they are with all your money and that. So, this one time, I'm on the coast road, pissing it down, and I drive past a lad. And he's got his mates in the car, and one of them's filming my car. I don't really think much of it. I just acknowledge the lads. But then, like 30 seconds later, I catch a car in my rear view mirror. And it's proper flying. Easy doing 100, and this is a 50. And then before I know it, he's miles ahead of us, and he's slamming his brakes on, and he's fishtailing all over the place because there's a speed camera, and there's a car in front of him that he nearly crashes into the back of. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but our Nicola, is in the passenger seat, and she, like me, is hating this. She's got no idea what this lad is trying to prove. So I look at her, and I'm like, it's always some in an S3. Which is a real shame because the S3 is a really good car. But let's be honest, it is the D-squared baseball cap of cars, the Gucci sliders of hatchbacks, the little Armani man bag of performance vehicles, the Hugo Boss polo shirt of family transport, yeah, that's enough now. Or maybe this whole thing is just my prejudice that's based on one anecdote and then a series of minor observations that have reinforced the stereotype. There's a lesson in here somewhere, probably. What doing again? Oh yeah, reviewing an Audi. Right, let's do it. Seriously, I'm just sticking around. I mean, the lad could have been in anything. A-class. Anything. So the S3 is a family hatchback, which means it's got a hatchback, obviously, which means it's quite practical, but not quite as practical as an SUV, but practical enough. But because it's smaller and lower than the average family SUV, it is fundamentally better to drive, less bulk to push around and lower center of gravity in it. And it is, of course, an Audi, which means outstanding interior quality. Everything you touch feels like it was built by a crew obsessed with solidity. So solid crew, if you like. What a crap joke.
21 seconds.
So that's the hatchbacky bit, but all of that stuff applies to any A3. Really, it's the S bit that's important here. The S stands for sport, which means this is fast. To that end, it has 333 horsepower and is limited to a 155 miles per hour top speed. And quick note, the S3 was updated in 2024, so if you are thinking about getting a nearly new one of these, then there's a good chance it'll only have 306 horsepower and do 0 to 62 in 4.8 seconds, which is rubbish, innit? On that whole thing though, the original S3 back in had 210 horsepower, which is roughly the same as today's A3 plug-in hybrid. That's like the really sensible company car driver one. How times have changed, eh? And actually, it's the changing times that are this car's biggest problem, in my opinion. Basically, any electric car with similar power to this will make this feel kind of slow, kind of lackluster when you put your foot down. So say mid-level Hyundai Ioniq 5. This has 320 horsepower, is not actually as quick on paper, but it feels much quicker because, and not to get too technical about it, EVs go pew as soon as you put your foot down. That said, no electric car sounds like this.
It's nice.
The problem is, much of that sound comes from an upgraded exhaust system called the apropos of exhaust, I believe. I think that's what it says. And vis-a-vis the options list, it costs 4,125 grand. And what that means is if you tick that box, then the price of this car goes close to the price of the only Audi A3 that's above this one. I started pointing too early there. The RS3, which I reckon probably stands for really sport because it has a 2.5 litre engine with 400 horsepower and it doesn't need a fancy exhaust to sound mint. And and it does the 0 to 62 thing quicker than the original V10 Audi R8, which is mad. And it looks much more like a proper performance car than the S3 does. Which begs the question, what is S3? Is it like a halfway house sort of thing that's neither nothing nor something? Or is it the perfect blend of usable performance, day-to-day comfort, and reasonable running costs? In other words, and finally, of course it doesn't. This is the car that it always was. A car for people who want something quick and interesting to drive, but who don't necessarily want to shout about it. Well, most people. It strikes that balance beautifully in the way it looks, and the way it feels, and the way it sounds. Me personally, I want it to look a bit more like an RS3. A bit more aesthetically entertaining. A bit more, well, really not as angry about this whole thing. It just came to mind and I just thought I would hook this whole review on it because it's an interesting thing to do, right? Hopefully. Like and subscribe. But one of the mintest things about this car is that it is just so good at being a normal day-to-day hatchback, and part of that is because it looks like one and it feels like one. So adaptable suspension is standard, which means that you can flick between hard and soft, because as everybody knows, you don't want to be hard all the time, right? But on a basic level, this is a really comfortable car because it gets the fundamental stuff right. So the seat, dead comfortable. It's a sports seat, but it doesn't pinch you in loads. And the driving position is spot on. All that good stuff, just ergonomically perfect in the cabin. So it looks a bit on the retro side now, especially compared to Audi's newer stuff, but that's always going to happen. Companies do newer cars and then the older ones look less new. But everything works really well and feels really good. So the buttons for the aircon are all clacky and you can find them dead easy. And the screen software kind of looks all boring and monochrome, but it too works really well. It's just good. I wasn't always this kind about the interior though, as it turns out. This is a freeform jazz festival of buttons and layers and shapes and textures and materials and buttons and layers and shapes. Oh well. Almost as if this whole review thing is really subjective and depends very much on how a reviewer is feeling on any particular day. Anyways, one of the things I was harshest about was the air vents. They've just been stuck on. Actually what it looks like is that the design team was about to present this car to the bosses at Audi, and 10 minutes before that was due to happen they realised that they hadn't put any driver's air vents into it. Yeah, I was definitely in a mood when I wrote that, because in fact I've driven a few cars quite recently where the air vents just suck. Not literally, they blow obviously, but they suck at blowing. There's nothing funny about that. And it's usually because designers come first and the air vents are just in a weird, awkward place. These things though, perfect, just in the right place. I also like the way this car moves. Yeah, it just feels really predictable, even when it's wet like this. And the tires and the steering wheel are telling you exactly where the car's going and what it's doing, and that inspires confidence. So it makes it fun to drive in a completely non-scary, very progressive sort of a way. But if you're going to be all judgmental about it, which is my job I suppose, you would say that the steering feels a little bit artificially heavy. BMW, for example, has always been really good at that thing where the steering feels really light, but it still tells you exactly what's happening at the wheels, whereas this feels just like it's had weight dialed into it. I mean, having said that, it is a lot more mechanical than it used to be, this car. It's a bit of a cliche, but fast Audis were always really mint at the straight line speed stuff, but never quite so good at the cornery bits, but they are getting much better. This is definitely the most mechanical feeling S3 ever. And that's partly because there's a bit more power, but also because there's a lot more trickery happening underneath the wheels. Not underneath the wheels, that's the road. Trickery happening in the chassis. One of those things is that with the update, this car got a clever turbocharger that pre-spools up, so it's not as laggy. Turbo lag, of course, being that thing where the turbo takes yonks to spool up, and then all of a sudden it does spool up and it forces a load of air at the cylinders and makes the car go bosh! Nothing, pew, boom, pew, like that. I don't know why I've gone all camp era Batman. It also gets the torque splitter from the RS3, which literally splits the torque proportionally across the back wheels. Torque being the thing that... never mind. To make the car either more grippy when it's slippy, or more oversteery when you want it to be. Oversteery being the thing that looks like this. And it's got a dynamic plus mode that takes away lots of the driver aids and makes the car even more fun in a very back-endy sort of a way. Back-endy being the technical term for it's more fun and more engaging and more rewarding than ever, basically. But it is still an Audi, which means it's relatively economical, it's really quiet, it's obviously very well put together, great long distance car. It's just all of the car that you need. And it's probably never gonna break. Fail, that is. Mainly because all of the bits are pretty common. So for example, 1 in every 2.4 cars that leaves a Volkswagen Group factory has this particular engine in it, or some version of it. Don't look that fact up, just take my word for it. It's definitely true. And it is, of course, well equipped and safe and all that other good stuff that But the A35 isn't quite as agile on a B road as the S3, but it does feel more exciting generally, both to drive and to look at. Also not quite as agile as the S3, which is weird for BMW. Although, like the Mercedes, the M135i just feels a bit more interesting in every way, and the interior feels much more modern and just better. Yes! Get this, it's proper mint, and it's just been killed off, probably for being too awesome. Actually, it got killed off because of emissions. Boo! Killjoys. So that's that. This doesn't suck. It's a mint everyday car, obviously. Slightly a bit boring, probably, but you know, it handles really well and it's just dead good at everything because that's like what Audis do, innit? Okay, I'm off to find someone in a Lamborghini. That's right. It's amazing that actually it was proper pissing it down then just while I was doing that little sequence, and now it's stopped. Thank you, baby Jesus.
We'll be back right after these messages.